reading is taken from Matthew chapter 13. A short passage from Matthew chapter 13, verses 44 to 46. Two short parables. The kingdom of heaven is like treasure hidden in the field, which someone found and hid. Then in his joy, he goes and sells all that he has and buys that field. Again, the kingdom of heaven is like a merchant in search of fine pearls. On finding one pearl of great value, he went and sold all that he had and bought it. The word of God for the people of God. Thanks be to God. What is the kingdom of heaven like? Or to put it in a simpler way, what is the world like if God's ideas can be fully implemented on earth? Now, if you conduct a survey, you will probably get 1 million different answers to that question. But to you and me, what really matters is Jesus' answer. So what is the kingdom of heaven like according to Jesus? Well, according to Matthew chapter 13, Jesus answered that question with 7 parables. And this morning, we will only focus on 2 of them. To simplify the process, I have chosen to summarize the lessons of these 2 parables with a pair of words. Actually, 2 words: unexpected and priceless. Unexpected and priceless are the words that I have chosen to summarize these 2 parables. Let's take a look at them one by one. Jesus said the kingdom of heaven is like treasure hidden in the field, which a man found and hid or reburied. Then in his joy, he goes and sells all that he has and buys that field. In the days before banks, in the days before safety deposit boxes, like the days of Jesus, it was a common practice to bury your valuables in the ground, to keep them, from the forces that taking over their villages and towns. For example, in the time of war, if enemies are coming and you don't have banks, safety deposit boxes, the only way to protect your valuables is to bury them in the ground. In this parable, someone unexpectedly came upon such buried treasure. Please note that this person was not on a treasure hunt. He just stumbled onto it. And that is our first lesson. Brothers and sisters, sometimes God's greatest gifts are totally unexpected. Let me tell you a true story. Raoul Delbene is a famous poet, artist, author, and a pastor. But there was a time when Raoul himself was searching for answers in his own life. Someone told him about a man in Los Angeles who has a reputation for being a wise spiritual guide. So on a trip to the West Coast, Raoul made an appointment to see this wise man, whom he was so sure could help him in his spiritual quest. But on the day of their meeting, Raoul drove up the coast and arrived, only to discover that the man was not even there. He waited and waited, and the longer Raoul waited, the angrier he became. Finally, the man arrived, And that man was so short, did not look at all like the wise man Ron had pictured. So Ron was very disappointed. The wise man asked Ron why he had come to see him. And for the next 60 minutes, Ron poured out his hopes, his fears, his anxieties, and his dreams. But in the end, that wise man only said this. Now pay attention. Ron thought perhaps the wise man would place his hand on his head or on his heart, and he would explode in some kind of spiritual, trance, something like that. But he did not. The wise man did not put his hands on his head or heart. The wise man simply said three things that Ron should do. And before Ron could even ask questions or even respond, the wise man left the room and disappeared. Ron felt cheated. He had traveled all that way. And for what? He did not know. After Ron returned home, his wife, Eleanor, asked him about this meeting with the wise man. And Ron said, you know what? He told me there are three things I must do. 1, pray unceasingly. 2, go home and love my wife and children. And 3, do what needs to be done. And that's all. His wife, Eleanor, looked straight at Ron and said, thank God. Finally, someone told you that. What the wise man told Ron was actually true. In retrospect, Ron writes, he remembered, this guy was, far wiser man than I appreciated at the time. The three things that he told me were actually valuable, just like treasure in the ground. Well, when Ron least expected it, he made a great discovery. And that discovery brought him great joy. But there is a second parable. The kingdom of heaven is like a merchant in search of fine pearls. On finding one pearl of great value, he went and sold all that he had and bought it. Unlike the person who stumbled onto an unexpected treasure, this merchant was purposefully searching for one fine pearl. After much effort, the merchant finally found the pearl he was looking for. Filled with indescribable joy, the merchant was willing to sell all he had to own that pearl. Brothers and sisters, the life of faith is exactly like that. Having Jesus Christ in our lives is priceless, just like the priceless pearl, more than any treasure we will ever possess. Let me tell you another true story. Marjorie Denny is a high school teacher and author of two popular books, The Saints Among Us, published in 1992, and The Next American Spirituality, published in the year 2000. At age 16, very young, Margie gave her life to Jesus Christ. Life wasn't easy for Margie, but her commitment to Christ held firm even in her most difficult days. And then at age 30, Margie returned to college to gain her teacher's certification. And for the next 18 years, Margie dedicated herself in developing learning strategies to help students acquire a love to learn, as she strives to be, positive example and mentor to her students. He decided to teach in the city of Chicago, actually in the most, poor and devastated part of Chicago. Chicago was once, in those days, actually in the early 20th century, Chicago was a terrible place to stay. There is a machine gun, Thompson machine gun. Do you know what the nickname of that machine gun is called? It is called Chicago typewriter. Because Chicago, the mobs, the gang members in Chicago, they use machine guns to wipe people away. And that sound, it's just like typewriter. This is called Chicago typewriter. It is Thompson, submachine gun. Margie chose to be with the student in that area. This is her dedication. A long-time acquaintance has this to say about Margie. She said Margie could have chosen a lucrative career, but he chooses one in which she can serve people. Because making the world a better place is priceless to her. Priceless. Brothers and sisters, sometimes God's greatest gifts are totally unexpected. It just happened to you. Like the 3 advices that the wise men gave, to Ron. But sometimes, the greatest things, you have to spend all your time, all your personal belongings, dedicate all your life, because that gift is priceless. When Jesus finished telling the 2 parables, he asked his disciples, have you understood all of this? Surprisingly, the disciples said, yes, we understand that. If the word of God had touched your heart, touched your life this morning, if you are willing to make Christ a priority of your life, I hope that you will respond the same way. When Jesus asks you, have you understood all this? My teaching, my way of life, sometimes is priceless, and my gift is unexpected. Do you understand? I hope that you will say yes. I will turn to the Taiwanese congregation.